Hi everybody, Dugraz here with Dugraz Reports. Today I'll be telling you about all the trips I've ever taken on points and miles so far. Now to be specific, I will talk about how I paid for them, and I will talk about the points I used to the best of my memory. I got into the game in the spring of 2019 in terms of credit card points and miles, so that time frame makes it short enough I can remember these fairly well, but not so long that I'm going to have to go on and on and on. So let's review it together. First, though, in this video, I will talk about a RIP trip, and I use a little acrostic to help explain what I mean by that. R stands for rental car. I stands for inn, which is motel, lodging, however you lodge. And P stands for plane, air transport. This is just an acrostic that I use to say, hey, this trip covered rental car, inn, and plane. That's what 90% of points and miles enthusiasts focus on. And if you can cover those things, the little extras like entertainment and souvenirs and going to a national park, admission expense, meals, those kind of things are not included here. All right, let's take a look. Here we go. First up, in October of 2019, I went to St. Charles, Missouri, which is in the St. Louis area. This was a long weekend solo trip. Now you'll notice my hometown is Central Iowa, the Des Moines International Airport. Right in the middle of Iowa, or just below the middle, is where I fly out of 99% of the time. St. Louis, Missouri, down below is marked. That was just mainly where I flew into. The Lambert Airport is right across the Missouri River from St. Charles, Missouri. That was the first capital of the state of Missouri, and it's a very historic area. You'll notice in this video I like historic things. And then halfway between the two, in the far southeast nub of Iowa, that part that sticks down, is the town of Keokuk. I spent a night there. So I flew to St. Louis, drove back in my rental car. Here's some of the things I did, and I'll be referencing other videos on my channel. You can just go to my channel and look up all these videos if you want to learn about any of them in particular. Here's how I paid for things. So for the rental car, I had recently obtained a Chase Inc. Business Preferred, and I had enough points from the sign-up bonus that through the Chase portal, I believe I was able to book a rental car. And same thing for my lodging. I only had one night in a motel, and that was in Keokuk on my halfway back point. I used the Chase portal. And then for the plane, I have a Wells Fargo Visa signature card. And if you watch this channel, you've seen me reference it lots of times. This is an older card. I'm sorry it's not open to new applicants, that lets you book airfare through their portal with a 1.5 modifier. And for some reason, it's the only credit card portal I know of that lets you book Southwest flights online. There's a direct Southwest flight from Des Moines to St. Louis that I've used at least 3 times in my life, maybe more. So that's what I used for my first ever RIP trip. Next up, in February of 2020, my whole family took a week-long trip to northern Arizona. Page is the name of the town we stayed in. Page, Arizona is right at the top middle of Arizona, about 2 hours from the Grand Canyon, which would be to the left on this map, or the west. We did go there. It's in the same area as Horseshoe Bend, Antelope Canyon. There's a big lake. There's the Glen Canyon Dam. Lots of fun things for a family to do, especially a family from Iowa getting away to Arizona in February, where it's in like the high 40s and the 50s. It felt very nice. A video I did about it is in the top left. I wrote the COVID-19 edition of my video because this happened right before the COVID pandemic. Remember how March Madness got canceled that year? Well, this was like 2 weeks before that, like the 3rd week in February. We went on this vacation, kind of heard about COVID. Then we got back and found out the entire world was about to shut down. Ignore that grand total 845. That's just a screenshot telling you how much we spent on non-RIP things. In terms of how we paid for it, the rental car was on my US Bank Altitude Reserve card, which I had just got. That has a real-time rewards feature where you get a text message on certain travel purchases, and you send a text back, and you can redeem your points with a 1.5 modifier for travel. It has primary car rental insurance, so it's a great rental car card that you'll hear me reference often. For the inn, I had gotten an American Express Blue Cash Preferred. This is not a points card, it's just a cash back card, but the cash back earned on the sign-up bonus plus category bonuses was enough to pay for the vast majority of our hotel. I actually paid for it on the altitude reserve so I could get points, but covered the charges with sign-up bonus and category bonuses from that American Express Blue Cash Preferred. The plane was American Airlines, just regular old. I think we had main cabin extra, booked through the Chase travel portal on my Chase Sapphire Preferred, which I had gotten a few months before that and met the sign-up bonus. Before I go any further, I will mention that on this particular YouTube channel, I talk about finding epic value in travel. I'm just a regular guy, a regular old American with a 9-to-5 job who likes credit card rewards, points, miles, that kind of stuff. Does that sound interesting to you? If it does, please subscribe to the channel and please click the thumbs up button. Let's keep going. Next up, in the summer of 2020, remember this was in the height of COVID, we stayed at the Club Wyndham Resort in Fairfield Bay, Arkansas. This was a week-long family vacation. You'll see Fairfield Bay on the map here, just north of central Arkansas. It's a very rural, private kind of place where you don't run into a lot of people. Look at that pool. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. All of the rooms were like townhouses where you have your own separate entrance, separate bedrooms for my wife and I and the kids. So low COVID problem type trip. It was a social distancing vacation, I guess you could say. I've got a couple different videos out there, including one about I was debating whether or not to pay myself back to cover the trip costs, and I did. Speaking of all that, for the rental car, we drove down and we rented a car, so it didn't have to be our family vehicle. That was on the US Bank Altitude Reserve. The inn, I used a purchase at hotels.com. I bought hotels.com gift cards at a Staples with 5x return on my Chasing Business Cash, moved those cards over to my Sapphire Preferred, and then did pay yourself back. At that time, grocery was a pay yourself back category. So I bought Visa gift cards at a grocery store, then spent that money on normal budget items and paid myself back at 1.25 cents per point. And that's how I covered that charge. That was a great option during the year 2020. Unfortunately, not as lucrative anymore. And then for the plane, there was none because we drove down in a rental car. Next up, in October of 2020, I returned to the St. Louis area. I specifically went to Kaskaskia, Illinois, flew into St. Louis. Kaskaskia, Illinois is about straight south and a little bit east of St. Louis. There's a bend in the Mississippi River. Kaskaskia is the only town in Illinois west of the Mississippi River, and there's a long story there. There's a lot of history going all the way back to the American Revolution. And then the dot that's about an hour west of St. Louis is the Daniel Boone grave and the Daniel Boone homestead. You'll notice I like history, so when I travel by myself, I tend to hit up historical landmarks, geographic oddities, those kinds of things. Here's a couple of videos about what I did. There's a picture of me in front of the Daniel Boone home that's there. I think it's Marthasville, Missouri. And I used the IHG Cash Plus Points trick. I did a video about that, and I'll mention that on the next slide. So for the rental car, once again, the Altitude Reserve. For the lodging, my first was a no-name hotel I booked through the Chase portal. I did the same hotels.com gift card and indirect pay yourself back trick that I'd mentioned in the previous trip. And then for IHG, sometimes you can get a points plus cash trip at a low cents per point cost. Cancel it, you keep the points, so you've indirectly bought points and then use those points to buy the actual IHG booking that you want. Before I even had an IHG credit card, I did that trick a couple times. And then, once again, I used the Wells Fargo travel portal with Southwest Airlines to get there and fly back. This one was round trip. In September of 2021, I went to Pittsburgh, Morgantown, and Wheeling on a solo long weekend trip. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is in the southwest part of Pennsylvania. Straight down is Morgantown, West Virginia. The panhandle of West Virginia that kind of sticks straight up, that's where you'll find Wheeling. And here's some of the things I did. I had a rental car fiasco, but it got straightened out. You can watch a video about that. I saw the historic Wheeling Suspension Bridge. I believe it's the oldest active suspension bridge in the United States. Did a driving video. Saw a bunch of bridges that were mentioned in my breakdown video. Any of the videos that I reference here, the little thumbnails I'm providing, just go to the Dugras Reports channel, look up a list of videos if you're interested in any of them. If you can't find them, just drop a note in the messages below or the comments section below. To pay for it, rental car, once again, the US Bank Altitude Reserve. For my lodging, I transferred Sapphire Preferred Chase Ultimate Reward points to World of Hyatt to get a nice Hyatt Regency near Pittsburgh. I did the hotels.com cheap gift card trick again. And by that point, I had a Hilton Honors business credit card, which I used to book a Hampton Inn in Wheeling, West Virginia. Incidentally, that has been voted the nicest Hampton Inn in North America like 4 out of the last 7 years or something like that. And they've got the banner out front to remind you. For the plane, once again, Southwest Airlines through the Wells Fargo portal. Next up, in April of 2022, I took a solo trip on a long weekend to Norfolk and Yorktown, Virginia, right there on the east coast of Virginia. Norfolk is by Virginia Beach. That's the southern dot. And then up the peninsula to the northwest, you'll find Yorktown. For those of you who aren't history buffs, Yorktown was the final war of the US-American Revolution, where we gained our independence from Great Britain, and effectively the last battle that kind of secured everything to gain that American independence. I did a couple different videos. I did a wrap reminding you what a RIP trip is. I did a separate video about the RIP trip to Yorktown, driving around on a place called Gwynn's Island nearby. A lot of historical stuff, obviously, kind of the oldest part of America. Botanical gardens there in Norfolk are well known in some of those natural pictures. Top right, you'll see a house that looks a little more modern. That was the bed and breakfast I stayed at through Airbnb in Yorktown, and I'll get to how I paid for that in just a moment. To pay for the whole thing, rental car. Guess what? It's the US Bank Altitude Reserve again. For the lodging, there's a couple different things. I used a combination of Hilton points from my business card, and at that point, my Sapphire Preferred had turned into a reserve, and the travel credit went towards the balance. It was like a points plus cash type thing. In the middle, you'll see the Capital One Venture X. I had picked it up when it first rolled out and had the original 100,000 point sign up bonus. And when it first came out, you might remember there was also a $200 credit for vacation rentals like Airbnb or Vrbo. Well, I booked that Airbnb right in the heart of Yorktown, just within walking distance of the national battlefield, and that credit worked. So $200 off that Airbnb, and on a net basis, it only cost me like $70, which I covered with cash from my travel savings account. I used the IHG Rewards Club points plus miles trick again to book one last hotel stay at I think it was a Holiday Inn, not too far from the Norfolk airport on my way back. And then for the plane, this one was Delta, so I used the Chase portal to book a Delta flight from Iowa to Atlanta to Norfolk round trip to cover that. My Sapphire Preferred has sometimes been a Sapphire Reserve, and I can't remember which one it was at that point in history. So it was either 1.25 or 1.5 to the portal. Probably the biggest trip we've ever taken is June of 22. We went to the North Woods of Wisconsin and Michigan. This was a family trip for 10 days. North Woods refers to the very northern part of Wisconsin, and it laps into the upper peninsula of Michigan. So you can kind of follow that dotted line. The orange circle is where our lodge was, our cabin, and I'll explain how we got a cabin in a little bit. It was like 2 miles from the Michigan border, but it was in Wisconsin. And then we'd go to these other attractions, some in Wisconsin, some in Michigan over the course of those 10 days. I did a whole separate video about my Northwoods vacation, how we paid for it. There's a video embedded within that video called Vacation with Dugras, showing many of the activities and beautiful waterfalls we saw. Screenshot of some paid activities like a boat tour, bowling, a museum, aerial ski lift that's been converted into a watchtower, some cool things like that. In terms of how it was paid for, well, there was only an in RIP on this one. We took our personal vehicle because, again, I wasn't quite trusting rental cars coming out of the COVID pandemic. There was no need to fly because we drove from Iowa. In terms of the lodging, we did stay one night at the Hotel Ivy in Minneapolis. I used my wife's American Express Platinum card with the Fine Hotels and Resorts benefit to book that. There are no fine hotels and resorts in the state of Iowa, but there was this one in Minnesota, which worked for an overnight stay for us. Then when we got to our cabin, I used my Wyndham Earners Business Rewards card. Wyndham partners with a company called Vacasa, which is like a competitor to Airbnb, but it mostly focuses on cabins, lodges, a little more rustic. And they charge per bedroom, 15,000 points per bedroom to book it through Wyndham at Vacasa. And if you have any of the Wyndham credit cards, there's a 10% points discount. So functionally, 13,500 points per night per bedroom. Well, we found a cabin that had only one bedroom, but it had a full finished basement. It had a loft with 4 twin beds where my boys could sleep, and it was an entire house. We had an entire house for 13,500 per night on a card where all I did was pay $95 for an annual fee and a little bit of spending, and I had enough points to cover all that. It was a really awesome redemption. And then at the bottom, I've got my Capital One Venture X again. The Venture X has a $300 annual credit to help offset the annual fee when using their portal. We booked a boutique motel right on Lake Superior and used that $300 travel credit, which covered the lion's share of that hotel. In July of 22, I did Clinton and Normal. Now, Clinton and Normal sounds like a bad law firm or a rock and roll group, but it's really 2 towns. Clinton, Iowa is on the easternmost point of Iowa, right where the Mississippi River kind of humps out. And then Bloomington is right next to Normal. They're like twin cities, but the motel I stayed at was in Normal, so I called it a trip to Normal. The Normal trip. In terms of things we did, in Clinton, I watched a minor league baseball game, and there's some pictures of that at the top. You can find a video where I talk about small but good credit card redemptions, how I booked the motels, a couple driving videos. I did go by Springfield, Illinois, which was close to Bloomington Normal, and saw the Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum, as well as the Lincoln Homestead, his original 1860s home. In terms of how I paid for it, there was no rental car. I drove my personal vehicle. For inns, I spent one night at a Hampton Inn and used my Hilton Honors points. And for 2 nights, I stayed at a Hyatt Place in Normal, which is a very nice Category 1 Hyatt, only 5,000 points a night, transferred from Chase to World of Hyatt. For the plane, I cheated a little. It wasn't a plane, it was a train. I took Amtrak from my lodging in Normal to Springfield, about an hour and 15 minutes south of there. I didn't want to drive and try to find parking and those kind of things. And I liked the train, so I just rode Amtrak. It drops you off like 7 blocks from his homestead. So easy to walk around, didn't have to worry about parking, no, risk of my car getting stolen or anything like that. And I like riding the train. So it was like $30, put it on my altitude reserve and did the text message thing, real-time rewards to pay for the whole thing in points at a 1.5 cents per point value. That brings us to the end of all the trips I've taken so far. You may wonder if there's anything on the horizon. Well, there are, coming soon. In April of this year, I'm planning to go to Pensacola, Florida, just by myself, see some Civil War forts and those kind of things. That is booked. I can't say for sure I'm going, but I'm tentatively planning on going. And then summer of this year, my entire family is going to England and Sweden. We've already booked first class, or business class, I should say, tickets on Air France. And hopefully everything works out with that and we end up going and it's a great time. I will be sure to report back on both of these. Drop me a line in the comment section down below. Let me know what your questions are or comments. I will be happy to answer each one individually. Some of the credit cards listed in this video have refer a friend links. Check out a pinned comment and use those refer a friend links if it suits you. That'll support the channel. As always, may your spending be frugal and may your points be plenteous. Thanks for watching.